Heard the voice of Jesus say, "Come unto me and rest. Lay down your weary head, lay down upon my breast. Oh, my soul, rejoice. Oh, my soul, rejoice, 'cause I found in him a resting place, and he has made me glad. I found in him a resting place, and he has made me glad. He's made me glad. That song just makes me feel better. That might not make you feel better. You know, sometimes you hear a song and it just kind of comforts you. Maybe you do it as good as you can. You know, thank you so much for tuning in for this. And I appreciate it. I want to talk to you as a follow-up to my message a few days ago. You can also find it the same site from when I talked about pandemic fatigue. I want to talk to you about faith fatigue today. You know, pandemic fatigue, doesn't matter where you fall on this, no matter how you, what your opinion is, or whether you're, you know, taking a strong view in one direction or the other. The fact is we're all tired. And pandemic fatigue can lead to faith fatigue. You may feel low energy or lethargic. You may feel grumpy or angry, or that you're just looking for a fight. Seems like there's a lot of that going around. You may be critical and judgmental toward other people, or you might just be like I've been feeling, kind of forgetful. This can all be part of, well, stress, but ultimately pandemic fatigue. And you feel like this whole thing has just been going on too long, and it's too different, too much change all at once. It's really hard on us. You may feel like it's not fair, or you feel like you're too isolated, or you just don't feel like you know what's going on, or you're watching the news, and depending on what you're watching, it's one thing or the other. Now, I do want to encourage you, you know, it's easy to get pulled into these YouTube conspiracy theories. Let me tell you something, that's not a good source for your info. And because of that, because of this tendency of conspiracy theories this is a big shift in our culture as well, that if a conspiracy theory doesn't convince you, it convinces you that you can't know anything and you can't trust anybody. And that brings me to the reality that you feel like part of your faith fatigue, and maybe you're losing faith in others in general. You may even be saying things like, what is God doing in all this? You may be saying, why is God allowing this? And so when you have that pandemic fatigue, that is turning into an acute case of faith fatigue. And that could be true for you young people too. You're thinking, you know, what's going to happen with school and sports and everything else? That pandemic fatigue turns into faith fatigue. And it's at this point can easily happen is discouragement begins to set in. And we're warned over and over again in the Bible to watch out for discouragement, because it's really hard to encourage anybody else if you're discouraged. The threat of that weariness that hits us, the fatigue, the discouragement. That threat is real in your life. That's why the Bible says in Galatians 6:9, it says, let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. It's hard to not get weary, isn't it? So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. You know, you have to stay focused. You have to watch for that discouragement, to that weariness that hits you. 2 Timothy 3:13, or 2 Thessalonians 3:13 says, but as for you, brethren, do not grow weary in doing good. But it's easy to grow weary in doing good. You get fatigued. You're wondering, how long is this going to last, and is it going to be worth it? Most of the time, fatigue comes, this faith fatigue, comes, if you drill way down into it, down to disappointment. You know, that's what Proverbs chapter 13, verse 12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. You know, when your hope gets deferred, you think, oh, after 2 or 3 months, or oh, after 4 or 5 months, or oh, after 6 months, or oh, now they're talking a long time further. What begins, your hope keeps getting deferred. And what happens is your heart gets sick. You get discouraged. And when you're sick, you don't have strength, and you're weary. You might be saying, it should be over already. Well, I just want to say there's many, but I'm going to talk about 3 sources that can feed your weariness. And these are 3 ways that we often get the 3 most common types of disappointment. So I'm going to move through them fairly quickly, but I want you to really pay attention. And by the way, some of you are already there. You just may not know it. You're kind of asleep on your feet already. You're just kind of walking around and talking, but you're kind of feel like you're in a mode where you're really not connecting. So these 3 sources may be feeding your weariness, and it comes from, number 1, disappointment in problems, with the problems that you're dealing with in life. Here's the thing about problems. They just keep happening. You know, they could be on the news, or they can be in your life, or they may be a combination, or they may be in your health, or things were already hard and then they got harder. It may be in your finances. It may be in your marriage. Like I said, one of the things that happens when we have pandemic fatigue is you have to stay alert. You have to be awake to your relationships. And relationships begin to suffer. Your relationships in your family, or in your marriage, or maybe with your friends, or maybe in your fellowship of believers. But the problems just keep coming. Jesus said that this is really kind of how life is. In John 16:33, he said, these things have I spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation. You have problems. Take courage, I've overcome the world. You know, James says the same thing all the way through the Bible. It's a wonder we're so taken back by the fact that problems just keep coming. James 1:2 and 3 says, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, when you have problems, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And then he says, and in verse 4, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete and lacking nothing. We get shaken up. And I see a lot of Christians get shaken up. Like I said, it could be just the rapid change that hits us, and we haven't had a chance to really adjust to what the new situation is, the new set of problems. But we have to accept one thing on the basis of faith. God has allowed the problems that are hitting your life and our life together going through this time. He's done it, and he doesn't give us an explanation. We just have to trust him. He's done it for his glory and our ultimate good. You know, you remember the days, he's thinking about change. I was talking to some friends the other day about this, how before 9/11, and a lot of you younger people don't even remember this, but you used to just go to the airport, get out, and walk to the gate, hug them, and put them on the plane. Now you go through all the security. You got to get there at least an hour earlier. If it's international flight, a couple hours early. You got to do all this running around. We just accept it because this huge change happened. And here's the difference between now and then. See, now we only have to do that when we're reminded of how this dramatic hassle is taking place. We're reminded of it only when we go to the airport. But now, with the adjustments, with social distancing, with the things that are taking place with the pandemic, it's everywhere. You're never really off. And so this change is affecting every area, school and work and what you look like, church. It affects it all. But we have to come back and say, for whatever reason, for this time, God has allowed this. God is sovereign. He's allowed it for His glory and ultimately for your and my good. But we get upset. We don't always aren't willing to do it. We get anxious with the change and things get shifted around us. Some of you get angry about this, or people do get angry. And they're looking for somebody to blame and somebody to scapegoat, somebody to take it out on, and this is where this fervid kind of fertile ground for angry and anxious people that struggle with anxiety, are especially prone to these alternative facts in the conspiracy theories. And so that brings me to this. This anger that we oftentimes have and this anxiety, it needs an outlet, and that's when we begin to become disappointed with people. And by the way, people are not hard to be disappointed with. This is easy to do because people are so disappointing. Parents, kids, your own children, or grandkids, pastors like me. They're disappointing. Politicians, for sure, that's probably the one thing we can all agree on. Public figures of any kind. Friends, disappoint us. They aren't there when we expect them, or they don't rise to the occasion, or maybe they blunder through their own problems. They're going through their own problems, and so they're not only not helping us, but they're actually discouraging us. Family members that let us down, or maybe they don't mean to, but they're just so distracted, they're not really paying attention, and we feel left out. They disappoint us. Even our own church can disappoint us. Now, it's true, sometimes churches don't do what they could do, and sometimes they don't know what's really happening with you. And so that's important if you have something going on. That, remember, I'll just speak a little bit about this. I don't want to disappoint you, but I'm going to tell you something. If you expect me to read your mind, I'm going to disappoint you. See, the problem with you and me and all the people in our lives, they are all flawed and they are all imperfect. They all disappoint us, and we disappoint them. And by the way, you know another person we get really disappointed with? Ourselves, which is almost always a pointless exercise. You know, disappointment in self, I've done it before, and it's kind of just shows me where my pride is. Like I think somehow I should have been better and done better than I did, when in fact, when I'm not really depending on the Lord like I could, it usually comes out about, well, like you'd expect. This disappointment can lead us to a deep, deep weariness in our souls. Our heart can get sick. Your heart may feel sick right now. Just like, oh, so tired. Weariness and discouragement, the loss of faith, are of courage. It kills your morale. And then the enemy begins to whisper in your ear. He begins to run through your mind with his dirty little footprints. And he asks you things like, why are you trying so hard? Nobody else is. Why are you doing this? And why you're dumb, or you're this, or you're that. You're just being a follower, or whatever is going on. That's what happens. And then he says, look at them. Look at those people right there. They're a bunch of hypocrites. They're a bunch of slackers. Why should you do anything? Try hard, work harder, try and deal with this. You know, this temptation to look at others is one of the strongest temptations that even the best, the strongest and most dedicated disciples faced. You remember Peter? and John. Remember, they all scattered. And Peter had, let's just say, he had to have been disappointed in himself. And he had to be disappointed in a lot of things that happened. Nothing had worked out like that, and he had blown it. And so he has already denied the Lord. And Jesus comes and finds them out fishing. And he prepares a breakfast for them. And then he takes Peter for that. They have that walk where he asks him, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Lord, you know all things." He said, "I'm trying to love you the best I can." And Jesus, in his great grace and kindness, he restores Peter. But as they walk along the beach, Peter, turning around in John 21:20, he says, he saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, speaking of John, the one who also leaned back on his bosom at the supper and said, "Lord, who is the one who betrays you?" And so Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" And I just want to set the context a little bit. Jesus has told Peter that he is going to die. Pretty clearly, he's going to say, you are going to live your life, but you are going to be persecuted and you're going to be martyred at some point. And we understand that's through traditions, that's what happened. But then Peter turns and says, "Well, what about this man?" In verse 22, Jesus said to him, "If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." Jesus says, now he wasn't saying that John was going to remain until he came back. He was just saying, if I want him to be here forever, what is that to you? You follow me. You don't worry about him. You don't worry about those other people over there. You don't worry about whether they're doing this or they're doing that. You follow me. You do what I told you to do, because, hey, you know what? In the end, he's the one we're going to stand up and give an account to. We'll all stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account. And so he says, follow me. You follow me. But this is really hard. It's really hard to do. All of us fail. All of us come short. All of our witnesses and our testimonies and our examples are imperfect. Everybody but him. That's why the Bible says in Romans chapter 10, it says, whosoever believes in him, speaking of Jesus, shall not be disappointed. He's the only one that won't disappoint you. And that's why we need to look to him, like Hebrews 12:1 said, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. He's going to do it. For the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. That's an important thing to remember. And that brings me to my third thing that feeds your faith fatigue, your weariness. It's not just disappointment with your problems or disappointment with people, but it can be disappointment with providence, with God. Disappointment with providence, if we're really honest. And I hope you will be honest. Maybe you can't say this to anybody else. You and I could talk about it. But you may ask yourself this question, why, God? Why is this happening like this? I've tried to serve you. Why? God can handle that. Why did it have to happen this way? Why did it have to happen at this point? Or maybe we ask God, why won't you make it stop, God? Or God, why won't you fix this thing I really want fixed? If you've been taught or you've grown up in a religious community that you were taught, or it was kind of, and maybe not openly taught, but kind of assumed that God would always provide for you and he provide for every issue in your life. He'd fix every problem. You have a pain-free trip through life. You would just name it and claim it. These times that you're going through, like we're going through right now, can really crash you. You may think that maybe God has failed you, but it isn't God that's failed you. It's your idea about God that has failed you. It was just not real. It was a mythology about God, not God himself. If you thought that you could just kind of pray a certain number of amount of time, you'd be heard by your much speaking, or you would pray a certain prayer like, some formula prayer, and it's all going to go great like some of those people on TV tell you, then you're going to be disappointed. And I've seen many people go down this way and feeling like God failed them, but it wasn't God. God says in this world you have tribulations. And the Bible says that fix your eyes on Jesus because nobody else is the perfecter of your faith. You see, it's not God that fails. It's the ideas you have about God that fail. God never says life is going to be easy. God never says it will. As a matter of fact, God tells you it's going to be hard. But I'm going to give you the grace to love your way through it. I'm going to give you the grace to love your way through it. I tell you what, that is a miracle. You see, that's why Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3 says, "For consider him who endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." When you start thinking about the problems and people, you start thinking about life, how unfair it seems sometimes, how long it's taking. Consider him who endured such hostility of sinners against himself. Remember what Jesus was willing to do and what Jesus did, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. It puts things in perspective. We have to look to him, or we will grow weary and lose heart. We have to cry out to him, or we will grow weary and lose heart. He says, "Men ought always to pray and faint not." The best way to not end up just fainting out and dropping out is to pray. The fight of faith takes choosing to trust God with what you can't see. That's what the Bible says. That in Hebrews 11:1 it says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Not only do I can't see it, but I believe it, but I'm sure God's going to come through. For by it, the men of old gained approval. This is what it says in Hebrews 11:2. When problems came, and when problems came, those old timers, they looked up. They looked up because they knew that apart from faith, no one can please God. So let me just say this. You got problems. You're going to have new problems probably this next week. We're going to have more things to deal with in this pandemic. We'll have to deal with them as family members and as friends and as a fellowship. We'll have to figure out how to do it together and to stick together and be faithful to each other and to remember our friends and our family and our fellowship. But when problems come, you know what? If we're going to be like those people of old, we got to look up. Look to the Lord. When people fail us, and they are going to fail us, and we're probably going to fail them, you're going to fail them, I'm going to fail at times. What do we need to do? We need to look up. Fix your eyes upon Jesus. When God's ways make no sense, as a matter of fact, it seems like it's going the wrong way, what do? You fix your eyes on Jesus. You look up. Look up. Look up. That's why Ephesians 5 says, for this reason it says, awake, sleeper, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Wake up. Look up. Wake up. Look up. And it's amazing how different things look in the light. All those monsters and all those dangerous things in our lives, and sometimes they really are, but when you can see them in the light of Christ, you can manage them and you can understand what to do. By faith, look to the light. By faith, walk in the light as he is in the light. And, be the light. He said, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. You be that. Today, I really want you to have him make you glad. That he'll give you rest. I'd like you to go to the site that you're watching, and there'll be some ways you could respond. We call them the next steps. You might ask us to pray for you, and a lot of you guys don't do this because you maybe you haven't, but I'd like you to share this video with somebody if you think it would help them. And I'd like you to maybe ask us to pray for you so we can. You might check this box, pray for me pray for me. I have faith fatigue. You're just wore out with it, and we will pray for you. You say, pray I can turn from my disappointment to Christ. You've been disappointed. Maybe you've been disappointed in church a long time ago or somebody else. Look, I understand. If you've only had one or two, you're doing well. But this is not just true in church. All the way through life, human beings are failed, and they let us down. There's only one person in the universe who won't disappoint you. That's Jesus Christ. Whosoever believes in him will not disappoint you. And you might pray like this. I commit to look up to God in faith. It's time that you look up again. You've been looking down at your feet. You've been looking at all the dark shadows. You've been looking at all the problems. You've been watching way too much news and getting all spun up about it. You need to begin to look to God again. Trust God again. To relinquish your control and let him be God. Trust in Jesus Christ for all the forgiveness that you need because he died for you and rose. Consider him who died for you. He's going to get you through. If he can conquer the grave, he can conquer whatever you're dealing with and get you through it. And then let me just say this. I want to thank so many of you being so faithful in your giving. And I want to encourage you to continue to give. You can go right to that site and push giving, and you can give online or you can mail it to the church. There's on the giving section, it'll tell you exactly what you can do. Thank you for doing it. Some of you have been kind of like meaning to, and you haven't. Continue to do that. We're trying to do really good work with providing for needs and taking care of things, and to continue to do ministries. Thank you so much. Thank you that God is taking care of you and blessing you. And thank you for many of you that are continuing to be generous and give your tithes and gifts. I just want you to know, I want you to have his rest, that you will be glad, because you know what happens? Joy comes out of peace, and peace comes out of rest. God bless you.